a class starting at 8:30.
Okay.
So I don't know if that was enough time, if I should just join another call that's later.
Why don't you stick around for a little while, and then I'm gonna post this conference in the website in the Meet with a Professional, so you can go back and listen to whatever you missed. How about
Okay.
that? Okay. So hi, Katie. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I'm wondering if we can do a very quick whip around of who is everyone, just so we
That's
know
great.
where we are and what are we doing.
Yeah.
So, would you like to start, Katie?
So I am a food educator, and I work in the climate change space. I also have started a nonprofit called Sea Change Conversations that educates, particularly works to educate conservatives and moderates in this country about climate change. And we look at how climate change is going to affect health, the economy, and national security, because those are issues that seem to resonate. And we've been around the country and given a presentation to about 10,000 people at this point. I have split off from them recently, and I'm now working in just the food and climate change space. I teach cooking, and I also work part-time for the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Sciences, which is a research institution, and I don't do research there, I just do fundraising for them, but have a lot of fingers in many different climate change and ecosystem pies,
Amazing.
just to use a food metaphor, because that's what I do.
Veronica?
I'm Veronica. I currently live in Singapore.
All right. Daniela?
Hi, I'm Daniela. I live in Connecticut, but right now I'm in Tampa, Florida.
All right. Elia?
Hi, I'm Elia. I'm a sophomore and I live in Los Angeles, California.
Take?
Hi, I'm a sophomore and I live in Tokyo, Japan.
And Alona?
Hi, I'm Alona and I live in Tokyo, Japan as well.
Oh, cool. Okay. So who would like to start with some questions?
Let me start the ball rolling, because I've heard that you're all incredibly engaged and deep into this topic. So what are your perspectives on how our food systems are affecting climate change? And then how climate change will affect our food systems, because those are two different questions. So have you all heard about beef and cattle and methane? So that is one of the big issues, and that's why there's a lot of movement towards plant-based diets. Some of your questions that you sent in before were, how do you shop in a supermarket in a way that's good for climate change? And I would say it's hard, but keeping to plant-based diets is critical. I would also say there are a lot of ranchers now who are looking at ways to rear cattle that actually help the soil absorb carbon. So looking for meat products that are raised in a responsible way. Usually it's called managed grazing, is one way that you can have your cake and eat it too, have some beef, but still be working to support natural climate initiatives. When I talk about nutrition and cooking with my students, I mostly say try to get as far away from processed food as possible. So I was having a conversation with my niece recently. I said, "Why are you buying orange juice? Just have an orange." And she said, "Okay, well, that's extreme, but if you really think about what humans need from our plants and the animals that feed us, it's basic. It's really basic. We don't need to have all these highly produced foods." So I'm curious about if that sounds doable to you guys, if time and budget are an issue, which they are for many people. You know, they need to grab something that they can make quickly. So do you guys do your food prep, or someone does it for you? A parent or someone else, or someone in the dorm, or?
I would say it depends. Yeah, you can go.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Okay, I was going to say, I think it depends during the school year, especially when it's a sports season. I think it's a little bit harder because when I'm not home until like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., it can be hard to like bring really fresh ingredients to school and have them like stay fresh for that long. But I try to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it's my parents who do all the meal prep and stuff, so I don't really have much of a say in it. But I think they do try to, pick out sustainable ingredients and that kind of stuff.
So I wanted to share a couple of book titles with you in case you feel like getting more into this. This is one called Lentil Underground. And it's about these farmers who figured out that lentils, which are pulses, are a natural way for plants to absorb nitrogen. And one of the biggest contributors to climate change in the agricultural field is synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, which is made from natural gas, so it's made from a fossil fuel, and then the fossil fuel has to be heated to a high temperature, so that requires energy inputs. And then when it's put on the soil, a lot of it goes into the plants and helps them to grow. So we know that nitrogen is really important for plant growth, but any that isn't put on the soil is into the plant goes on the soil, where it's eaten by microbes that emit methane. And then the rest is, washed off into our streams and makes algal blooms, which also emit methane. So these guys figured out that certain plants are able to take nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil, specifically pulses like beans and lentils. So that's one of the reasons why lentils and soybeans are such a staple for a lot of plant-friendly diets. It's not only that they're not meat, it's that these plants actually are helping to replace all these fertilizer inputs that we have. So that was one thought. This book is called Growing a Revolution, and David Montgomery, he's actually written a lot of different books, but this is one of the sort of Bibles on this whole new concept of using cattle and managing the way that they graze in order to make the soil be a much better receptacle for carbon. There's also a TED Talk you guys might want to listen to by a guy named Alan Savory. He's kind of a controversial figure. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, not everybody agrees with him. Some people think his methods can't be replicated, but that'd be an interesting sort of way to delve into this topic a little more. He thinks we should have more cows because they could, managed correctly, do such incredible things to our soil. It's a question out there. This is a little more academic and hardcore. Eating Tomorrow. The future of food, and this really talks about, how we've put our food systems in the hands of giant corporations, and whether that's a good thing, and does that give us the resilience we need? Because that's really what we're talking about. I mean, we're seeing this right now with this coronavirus. We need to be resilient, right? And I think it's actually I think going through this coronavirus is extremely good preparation for the next 50 years, because we're figuring it out. Okay, we're going to have to be able to do things quickly. We need to change our food systems. So that's one. And then this is in a similar vein by this woman from India, Vandana Shiva, who is somewhat of a radical, and she's fantastic and very well spoken, and has a lot of not super. Well, she doesn't have a very good opinion of American international agro business. So another perspective. And then just totally on a different plane is this book called Pharmacology by this American doctor that I love. And she talks about our food systems and our health. So she will do a chapter on how chickens are raised, and then a chapter on cancer rates. And it's extremely readable. And she has a great Twitter feed as well, and is always posting really interesting things on Twitter. So I just wanted to mention those are kind of my go-to books whenever I'm doing research. So you're all living in urban settings, is that right?
Katie, I wanted to ask you a question. Sorry, and maybe I hope maybe you know the answer to this. One of the trends in my city is to go organic. You know, to buy everything organic, from produce to meat to chicken to eggs, like everything, right? But does organic really mean sustainable as well?
No.
Okay, because the thing is, like, as you were asking, like, what are the choices of healthy eating? Well, one of the things I see in my town is a disparity between very low income and very high income. So the very low income people cannot afford all the organic stuff. But if you go through a McDonald's, you're able to feed all your family with, you know, what 12 eggs will cost at the supermarket.
Right. Huge food justice issues.
Yeah.
Well, those are two really different questions. You know, you talk to a lot of people and they'll say it's much more important to eat local than it is to eat organic, because a lot of our food is grown organically, because the organic market has doubled in the last 10 years. Just so in 10 years, it went from like a $20 billion industry to a $50 billion industry. So there's a lot of money to be made there. But a lot of those organic farms in California are huge monoculture farms. They're still destroying the soil. They're not promoting biodiversity, which we know is critical for the soil. And one of the things I think we don't look at the ground underneath our feet enough, but the soil is being degraded by having one crop in it year after year after year. So imagine if you were only fed one ingredient year after year after year. That's what we're doing to our soil. And we now know that our soil is this incredibly rich microorganism that needs all sorts of inputs. And that's why people are starting to rotate crops and use cover cropping and things like that. You know, your point is really critical. There's so much sort of chicanery done in labeling. So, for example, a cage-free egg could be an egg from a chicken. The chicken could be in a cage, but the egg falls out under the cage. I mean, that's not always true, but people try to make these sort of paper-thin distinctions. I would say the best thing is to know where you're getting your food from, if possible. That's why farmers markets are really great. A lot of farmers markets are now accepting SNAP and WIC, which are the federal food subsidy programs for people of low income. So farmers markets are my first go-to place. We need to support farmers. We need to buy our food locally. That's the first thing to do. In terms of food justice, there is some work being done on this. People are getting food into these urban food deserts, and there are a lot of people writing about that, but there's more work to be done there. You're right. I mean, there are rich people who can go and afford to buy organic everything, and a lot of other families for whom McDonald's is the only alternative because it can feed a family of 6 very cheaply. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things is that the SNAP and WIC, which is for women with infants and children, those 2 food security benefits are funded by something called the Farm Bill, which Congress reauthorizes every 5 years. So it was just reauthorized in 2018. So they'll start negotiating it in 2021. And the Farm Bill, theoretically, is supposed to help farmers. 75% of it is used to fund those food programs for the food insecure. So most of the Farm Bill goes to SNAP and WIC. And they've been cutting those programs over the last 10 years. So getting in touch with your legislators and saying, look, I think we really need to have strong SNAP and WIC programs for the food insecure in the next Farm Bill is something everybody can do. And then, there's state programs as well. Each state handles it completely differently. So.
Thank you.
But I worked in a food pantry, and a lot of our food was funded by SNAP. We had big bags of rice and beans to give everyone, and that was all completely funded by the Farm Bill. Mm. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's complicated. All these food system questions are so complicated.
It is complicated, but I just wanted to know the distinction between buying everything organic, and does that mean that you're also being sustainable and green and, like doing a full circle lifestyle change, trying to be more sustainable and everything, but yeah, it doesn't.
So here's a good example. I have a good friend in New Jersey who's a farmer. She has a big pick-your-own farm with apple orchards and peach orchards. They are not organic, but, for example, the way for peach trees, the biggest pest is this moth larva, right? The larva, the little worm, gets into the peaches, and then you can't sell the peach. So what they did, instead of spraying their peach trees, is they hung these little tags on the peach trees that smelled like the female moth. And the male moths came to the tree and got completely confused because they couldn't tell where the female moth was and where the tag was. And so they didn't end up fertilizing the female moth, and there was less larvae as a result. Now, they're not spraying that, but they cannot be called organic because they are using the form of pest management. Mm-hmm. So there are farms out there that aren't able to label themselves organic, but are doing sustainable things. So it's just really talking to your farmer is what, and really understanding how they're growing the food that is critical. And it's, in this day and age where we want to run in and grab and go, it's counterintuitive. Yeah. The other thing is that so many of our weeds that we have in our lawn are edible and highly nutritious. Dandelions, people spend millions of dollars on spraying Roundup on dandelions. Dandelions are incredibly nutritious.
Alona, did you have a question?
Sorry. So does that mean that organic companies tend to have more food waste?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I know the food waste issue is huge. Have you guys all seen this movie called Wasted? The story of food waste? It's a fantastic movie. Have you seen it?
No.
Wait, is it on Netflix?
I don't know.
No, I may have. I don't know.
But it talks about some of the really interesting ways that food waste is being dealt with. I don't think you can make necessarily blanket statements about companies and food waste. There's so much going on in the food waste department. There's a company in California, for example, called Apeel, Apeel, and they take wasted fruit that's can't be sold, right? And they desiccate it and dry it out, and then they have turned it into a preservative for other fruits. So, for example, they would take strawberries that couldn't be sold. They would desiccate them, and then they do some other process that I don't know what it is, but they take the dried strawberries and they use that to coat a banana, say, for example. Well, the pathogens that are going to attack a banana go to the banana and they're like, wait, this isn't a banana. This has got some other thing on it that I'm not used to, that I don't want to eat. Because most pathogens are very plant specific. So if you go on the APL website, it's fantastic. They show like a regular string bean and one that has been coated with one of their products, and they last in the supermarket for much, much longer, reducing food waste. So they're taking food waste and they're using it to reduce food waste. So there's lots of companies doing incredibly hopeful things out there in this space. There are a lot of companies that are trying to figure out how to turn food waste into energy. There's an apartment building in Sweden, I believe, where you send your food waste down the garbage chute and it is used to heat the building. Mm-hmm. So it's used to run the furnace. So people are really trying to figure this out. And there's, if you Google food waste solutions, there are places I think in Japan, actually, they feed a lot of food waste to pigs because it's incredibly nutritious food. Same with chickens. I think people are trying to do something about food waste, and I wouldn't say that organic companies necessarily create more food waste than non-organic companies. I just think you have to be really careful of that organic label and what it means.
Daniela, do you have a question?
So I go to a school right outside of Yale University, so we're like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So a group of us went to, it was like a seminar talk kind of thing, and there was a lady, and she was talking about food waste in like restaurants, grocery stores, like on a local level, and saying like, let's say there's 20 apples, and you moved like 4 of them, and now the ones that you moved have bruises. And now people don't buy them because they have this bruise, but they're still perfectly edible. And she created a company that actually takes that stuff and brings it like, food pantries, homeless shelter stuff, things like that. And like from restaurants, there's like so much that they can't use, but it's still perfectly edible. And I just want to know, is there like a better way to like combat that problem? Because there's just so much food that goes to waste, especially where we live.
So there are a lot of people who are working on that same question. I will say there's a new food delivery program called Misfits that takes ugly food, because a lot of people won't eat something just because it's, as you said, bruised, or if it's like a carrot that's got 2 prongs, they think, oh, it must be something wrong with it. Misfits does a home delivery vegetable box, I think on the East Coast, but they're trying to expand, of ugly fruits and vegetables. So that's one. There's a big supermarket chain in Switzerland that has whole bins that are called ugly soup vegetables, and they sell these ugly bruised pieces of turnips and onions and what have you for people to go home and make soup with. So the flip side of that is getting everyone to cook, right? So changing our standards, that we don't necessarily need an unbruised apple to eat, but that we can have an apple that has a bruise and it'll be fine. I mean, I know I generally try to. It's something I've had to learn in myself. Like, oh, I don't need to have a perfect looking apple. But also learning to cook, because when you are making a soup or a stew, you don't need things to be perfect looking. And I think the Whole Foods, when I used to live in New Jersey, there was a Whole Foods that also had a similar, like, ugly vegetable, ugly fruit. So I think supermarkets are starting to pay attention to this. And the reason that is because we're running out of landfill space. And the big landfills are starting to charge municipalities by the ton. Food waste is the heaviest type of waste. I mean, plastic, it's terrible how much plastic there is, but plastic is not, generally speaking, as heavy as food waste, if you think about, like, rotten food. So a lot of municipalities and states are saying, okay, we've got to address this from both the front end and the back end, which is to get more people composting. So I'm on the Energy and Environment Commission for my little tiny town in Connecticut, and we're having a big conversation about how to get everybody in the town to compost. We also have 4 big schools near us, how to get them to compost all their students' food waste. We've got hotels and restaurants, as you mentioned. So do we do a big composting project for them? So there's lots of ways to deal with it. But I've heard of other organizations like the one this woman talked about, where they take the food and not only give it to food pantries, but sometimes cook it up and deliver it in a way that people who go to food pantries can use. Because a lot of people who go to food pantries don't have a kitchen, right? They have some very basic cooking facility.
I was talking to the green team teacher at my school, and he's Canadian, and he's from a little town in Canada, and their town had the initiative to bring a compost to every household. And so now it's not optional. It's like, it's a must, but it was government based and funded, and they taught people how to do it. And so they do a lot of their trash or their food waste goes into that compost. And so they're making that change. They had that initiative. And because we were talking about, would it be possible to have a compost at the school we work at, and what would that look like? But, it's still we're still talking about it just to see if it's a possibility. And I don't know if it is yet, maybe. But I was amazed that in his town, it's not a choice. It is what they have chosen to do.
It's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the school that my children went to had most of the schools in Princeton, New Jersey, where my children went to school, have school gardens, and so have a compost for the school food waste that then is used by the school garden. So I don't know if that's an option in your school.
I don't know. I think we need to look more into it. But yeah, it's a good start.
Have any of the students been at a school where there's a compost or a school garden? Yeah. Yeah. And did you find it easy to use the compost? I mean, was that something all the students did, or?
The way our school works is they put in these new trash cans. So there's trash, recycling, composting, and really we just throw it in the compost. And I think they do it behind the scenes. We're not actually the ones. We're just creating it. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think I have to go. My Spanish class is starting right now. But,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, Elia. Thank you. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Any other questions that you guys have that you guys wrote on the doc for Katie?
Just checking them.
Okay.
This is a really interesting one. What's the best way to track the carbon footprint of the food we buy? Whoops. Um, and right now, there is no good way to track the carbon footprint of the food you buy. There's no method for doing that. Our food systems were created, or certainly our modern food systems were created in a way that never imagined that it would be an issue, right? That being said, there are some tools and some resources online. There's, for example, a great graph by the University of Michigan, and I can send that to you, that shows the carbon emissions per serving of beef, dairy, and all the kinds of meats. And I'll share that with you because that might be interesting. It shows you really what an outsized carbon footprint beef has. So I don't know. I wish there were a way to say on your package of chocolate eggs or whatever it is, this has an incredibly high carbon footprint. The other thing is that our food supply is going to change, right? So you're talking about your colleague from Canada. A lot of the maple trees in New England produce a lot of maple syrup. They're moving north. Canada is going to be pretty soon, like within 50 years, all maple syrup will come from Canada. Chocolate requires chocolate beans. Cacao trees require specific type of humidity, and it felt that's going to change as the climate gets warmer. The areas in the tropics where cocoa beans grow are going to be hotter and less humid, so chocolate is going to be much more expensive and more difficult to grow. Coffee, similar situation, also is grown in the tropics. And with the temperature getting hotter, the issue with the coffee beans is that the flowers ripen too quickly, and that means that the bean within the fruit also ripens too quickly, and it is just very poor quality. The critical thing to think about with coffee is that there are 150 million people near the equator who depend completely on the coffee trade for their livelihood. So again, we're talking about food justice. It's not just what can people afford to eat, but people whose livelihoods are dependent on certain foods. There are certain foods now that are being harvested at night in Southern California because it's too hot, especially during the summer season, for people to harvest them during the day. A lot of the people who harvest the food are paid by the amount they harvest, so they don't take breaks. So they're out there in the high temperatures in the sun, and they're getting heat stroke, and so there's all sorts of implications of things that we're going to have to deal with. And I think the good thing is that people are starting to pay attention to this, and as I mentioned, there are all these companies and entrepreneurs doing things to deal with these, and there's a lot of discussion online about it. So there are some solutions coming out for all of this, but everyone needs to get engaged, and I think we need to make sure our governments are engaged as well. So,
all right.
Anyway, I'm happy that you're all interested in this, and I hope I've interested you more, and you go and check out some of those TED Talks and online resources. And I'm happy to answer future questions if you have them for me, so let me know.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, we're going to say thank you to Katie, and that's it.
Okay.